The words, "You better leave," reverberated through the mostly empty bar. The four plate-clad guardsmen wobbled on their feet as they struggled to keep themselves upright in their inebriated state, which was not helped in the least by the thigh-deep mud that impeded their movement. The older half-elven gentleman Skamous had come to the bar with was now standing toe-to-toe with the lead guardsman. "Now, why would we leave? Before we but had our fill," the guard said while palming the hilt of his greatsword. Skamous ground his teeth at the entitlement that spewed forth from the guard's mouth. Slowly, Skamous slipped his hand to the ebony staff that was slung across his back. The older half-elven man raised one hand in a placating manner and pulled a sack of coin from his pocket. "Look, I don't want any trouble for my green friend here. But I buy you all around, and we just forget about all this." The guard's lip pulled back into a wolfish grin. "Alcohol and gold. Must be my lucky day. Eh, boys?" Skamous shot to his feet, a white-knuckled grip on his staff. "You're a disgrace to the guard. My father would have never stood for such disgusting behavior. You're supposed to be protecting the peace, and here you are, disturbing ours." The old man looked back at Skamous, an approving smile on his face. "Well said, boy." Then the old man shot back the rest of Skamous' drink, before shattering the tankard against the lead guard's head. A look of shock crossed the lead guard's face a moment before his eyes rolled back into his head, and the other side of his face was plunged deep into the thick muck that he was standing in. A second of stunned silence passed. Then the sound of three blades unsheathing pierced the air. Skamous stepped up next to the old man, brandishing his staff as one would hold a spear. One guard, a man with sandy blonde hair, trudged forward laughing. "You're still wet behind the ears. Don't worry, I'll remove 'em for you." Saying this, he chopped downward at Skamous, a strike that Dram had taught him to dodge within the first month of his training. Skamous almost effortlessly sidestepped the strike, before driving the end of his own staff into the guard's gut, then across the back of his neck. The moment of pride Skamous felt as the guard fell to the floor was quickly interrupted as glass shattered directly behind him. Another guard, poised to strike, was halted just in time by a glass liquor bottle to the face, wielded by the sweaty goblin who was now standing on the bar. The last guard, the youngest looking of the bunch, turned to flee only to trip over the unconscious body of his fearless leader, his head making a loud crack as it made contact with a bar stool on his way down. Skamous glanced around, making sure there were no other combatants to worry about. The older half-elf was running his hand through his muddy hair. "This wasn't how I intended the night to go. Go home, grab me the cheapest bottle of rot gut you got. Kid, help me drag these guys out of here." The hobgoblin pressed a switch on the wall, and a bottle ejected from the wall into Gorm's hand. "Here, on the house, but what are you gonna do?" The old man shrugged. "We'll drag 'em out of here and leave them where I know a patrol will walk by. The bottle's just for show, and smell, of course. Don't worry, even if they remember you, do you think any of them will want to admit they got bested by an old man, a kid, and a hobgoblin?" Together, Skamous and the old man dragged the city's unconscious heroes to a place the man said they'd be found before leaving. The old man uncorked the bottle, taking a swig which caused his face to screw up in disgust. He then spat it out on top of the unconscious men. "Tastes like Gorm's piss," the old man said, placing it in the lead guard's hand and letting it spill out all over the ground. Skamous, thinking back to just minutes ago, how the old man had handled himself in the bar, was baffled. "Who are you?" The old man shook his head, a small smile playing across his face. "Just an old man. One who's actually been watching your trials. You have some character about you. Not bad with that mandrake either. Anyway, let's get back. I want another drink." Skamous paused, eyes wide this time, really taking in the man that stood in front of him. He had long, stringy gray hair that reached down to his shoulders. His elven heritage was made apparent by the ears that were pointing through the matted locks, though one could surmise that he was not of full elven descent. due to the stress lines already painting their way across his face. And while the wrinkles and gray hair showed off his age, his emerald green eyes held a virility that Skamous had only seen once before, in the eyes of his weapon master Dram. "So, you're a master?" Skamous asked, a hint of amazement in his tone. "Yeah, I guess you could call me that, although I appreciate if you just call me Gregory. Anyway, it's been a long time since I took an apprentice." Skamous looked at Gregory quizzically. "Why is that?" Gregory shook his head, ignoring the question, looking up toward the darkening sky as he spoke, almost absently. "Rain check that drink, actually. I have preparations to see to." Then, without so much as a glance in Skamous' direction or an explanation, Gregory walked off, leaving Skamous both confused and a bit intrigued. As he watched Gregory walk away, a thought popped into his head for what may have been the first time. Skamous started considering his drive and reasoning behind joining the Order of Ashes. The Order stood as the leading rank of guardsmen, and if what he'd experienced earlier tonight was any indicator of what the Guard as a whole stood for, then he wasn't sure he wanted to bother. This line of thought made Skamous' head swim. This had always been his dream. He didn't know how to feel. But then, smiling, looking at the large clock tower in the center of town, Skamous thought to himself, "I got an hour before the ceremony. No better place to get the information than the source. Better go talk to Dram." A weight settled on Skamous' shoulders as he found himself walking the route toward Dram's home. Pretty soon, he found himself on the same road that he had taken daily to and from his sessions with the weapons master. Instead of the relief he expected to feel taking the familiar trail, he instead couldn't stop thinking of how different everything seemed. He had killed someone. He had seen one of his childhood friends die. And now, he was even questioning if his dream of joining the Order of Ashes was the right choice for him. Skamous approached the lightless building that was Dram's home, his buzzing thoughts not allowing him to see that something was wrong until he raised his hand to knock and noticed the door to Dram's home was slightly ajar. Skamous was immediately on edge, a bolt of anxiety shooting through his body. Dram was always one to preach on how important it was to keep one's home locked up and well defended. Skamous remembered a time that Dram had caught him leaving a window open a crack on a particularly hot day, and Dram had made him run 5 miles for that transgression. The weapons master always told him, "You never know when an attack will come, or even who will be holding the blade. Keep your doors locked and your mind sharp, boyo, and you might keep that empty head of yours." Skamous had always thought Dram was just being paranoid, but as he used the front of his staff to tap open Dram's door, he was no longer so sure that was the case. The house was eerily quiet, and Skamous immediately went to Dram's workbench, where he had routinely left exercises and weapon forms for Skamous to practice while he was out on business or while working with another student. There, he did not find a sheet telling him to hold a stick and sit in horse stance for 2 hours, but instead, as he approached the desk, he felt a tingle of magic in the air. Then he was able to continue forward, almost as if a barrier had been erected to protect whatever had been left on the desk. Looking across the oaken wood, he found a pouch of gold, the key Dram had used days earlier to unlock the chest that led to the tunnels below, and a note scrawled out in his weapon master's familiar chicken-scratch handwriting. "Skamous, I hope that you find this note in a time when you are well. I could not begin to describe to you how proud you've made me, as I have watched you grow from the squirt who couldn't even hold a dirk straight for more than a minute, to a man who's just as likely to knock the wind out of me as I am to knock it out of him. Me and my dear departed Martha never had the chance to have a child, but I feel as though I was lucky and got to experience something akin to fatherhood while training you. You have always told me that the reason you train so hard is that you want to join the Order of Ashes. In some ways, I know you would make an amazing addition to their ranks, while in others, I know you are much too good for them. I failed to broach this topic with you, as I did not want you to slack on your training. You are very gifted, and I do believe no matter what profession you end up in, they will be lucky to have you. Now though, I am afraid there are things that I must tend to, things that I do not yet wish to involve you in. There are dark secrets here in the city of Rothgar, and I worry for you. One day, you'll be ready to learn about them. But for now, just focus on your trials. I leave to you half of all my wealth, a total sum of 5,000 gold, my home, as I do not believe I will be coming back, and the key to the secret tunnels. This last piece, though, is not a gift, but a burden. While there are small rooms that merely contain practice dummies and a bit of booze, as you saw, the tunnels also hold many of the secrets that could get you killed. For now, I implore you to focus on your trials, but when you feel ready, or when you feel as though you do not know where to turn, go below and face what I have left for you. I hope one day we meet again, and if we don't, know that I love you as if you were my very own son, your weapons master, and most importantly, your friend. Dram.
Skamous wiped his eyes before the moisture that was gathering there could fall. While he'd expected to see less of his mentor now that he was no longer training underneath him, he did not expect it to be a permanent goodbye. Skamous felt his heart ache at the loss of his dear friend. But as his eyes met a nearby hanging clock, he knew that he had to get moving if he wanted to make it to the vigil in time. Placing the coin Dram had left him safe within the desk, Skamous pocketed the key to the tunnels and then hurried toward where the vigil was to take place. Skamous could already see the large crowd that had gathered around the trial center. He bobbed and weaved through the crowd, finding Elizabeth and Thalos right as the trial master took the stage and began speaking.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I would first like to say congratulations. Those of you who went out into the murmuring woods risked life and limb to prove that you were deserving of our praise and the best occupations we have to offer. While some of you settled for small prizes in the woods, others strove to take the very best. To all of you, I say, well done. Some were not so fortunate, though. Many of those who went into the woods this day did not return, and that is why we have brought before you the necromancer of Rothgar, to help these spirits who may be filled with fear, anger, and hate, to pass beyond the veil and into the afterlife, whatever that distant land may be. A torrent of whispers went through the crowd then, and as they died down, Skamous saw none other than Gregory stepping up onto the stage. As he did, he spread his hands wide, moving them in opposite directions, tracing arcane symbols in the air. A low chanting could be heard, slow and deep and rhythmic. Then, translucent forms shot from Gregory's body and into the sky. While most Skamous did not recognize, his eyes did eventually fix on the hateful visage of Sigurd, who looked to be staring down at him from the sky with a look of pure contempt and hate on his face. Most of the ghostly figures looked very sad or angry, but as the necromancer continued to chant, their faces loosened. Scowls turned to slight smiles and sneers to looks of acceptance. Even Sigurd's complexion changed to an apologetic one as he looked towards Skamous. Then, all at once, the spirits slowly began to rise. Quicker and quicker they moved upwards toward the night sky, blending in with the stars above them. Gregory looked out across the gathering. They are at peace. Keep their memories alive in your hearts, and they will never truly be dead. Then, take their mistakes to heart as well, so that you keep yourself and those around you safe. With that, he gave a small bow and then stepped off the stage. The trial master, quickly stepping forward, looking a bit flustered, said, "Yes, what amazing magic you've shown us. We thank you for sending those that would be restless off to the afterlife. Now, with our hearts full, we must retire. A new trial awaits for you all on the morrow. Take stock of your trial scrolls. Each of you have been given tasks of difficulty relating to the skill you have shown on your previous outings. Some of you may have even found that you've already been chosen by a master and will not be continuing forward. But those of you that have shown aptitude will continue and show us exactly how great you are." Elizabeth and Thalos smiled at Skamous' side, and slowly they moved away from the crowd. Walking forward, they found themselves a seat at a nearby picnic table. There, Skamous unfurled the scroll. Looking up at Thalos and Elizabeth, he read aloud, "Your team has been observed showing a great deal of diplomacy and combat skills. Some show that the blade is sharp, some know that the tongue is sharper, and very select few balance the two to near perfection. Your team, though, has done this well. You will now need to use these skills again. Take your artifact from the forest to one of the following powerful beings and convince them to help you turn it into an artifact which could help you in your future endeavors. Now, my dear players, it is your time to decide. The scroll shows 3 options of creatures to interact with that they can take the seed to. The first is a dragon. Surely a creature of such power could create something remarkable and magnificent, but also that creature must be something of great danger. Next would be that of a giant. While large in stature, they are still beings of mostly humanoid nature, right? Maybe they would be easier to reason with, not to mention the great treasure they may know of. Finally would be a hag. The magical Fey women are notorious for striking deals, not to mention they have a penchant for all things mystical. Many fun choices here, my friends. Just hop onto our YouTube comment section and cast your votes. And if you have another idea of an interesting creature you would think that would be cool for them to encounter instead, suggest it. If your idea has the most likes by the time we create the next part of your story, we will go with your idea. Until then, and until next time, let's write a story. Let's play a game without the dice.